Good morning and welcome. I'm Captain Kip Louttit, Executive Director of the Marine Exchange of Southern California, which operates the vessel traffic service for the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Two parts to this brief. One, me as the Executive Director, view, and then second, introducing Steve Winston, CEO of the company that does all of our IT and cybersecurity. So here's our beautiful building on a hill in San Pedro. If you ever want to come visit, we are open for visits. And the bumper sticker of what we do: safe, secure, efficient, reliable, and environmentally sound marine transportation. So again, two-part brief, delighted to be here. So in terms of what we do, the Marine Exchange has two primary functions: our Maritime Information Service and our Vessel Traffic Service. Mastermind is our IT contractor. What they do is provide our IT and cyber support, and Steve is going to talk about that, and also then do a case study. So you can see in the image here, our beautiful building on a hill at the south end of San Pedro, which is the port associated with the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. The port complex is completely artificial, so the entrance to LA is a break in the breakwater. The entrance to Long Beach is another break in the breakwater. The original Marine Exchange from 1923 down in the port complex, as the picture shows. So with that, we do go back 102 years, and we have changed functions and processes and technology. So the joke that I'll tell about this, all of this is cyberproof. And standing here today, that is actually my number one concern. I can hire great people, I can buy great equipment, I can maintain it to high standards, but that not responding, or this morning it decides it's time to do an update. I don't want it to do an update, I just want it to work. I'm the boss. Okay, with that, here is our world, which is the world of the entire Pacific, and in fact, the whole world. Every one of those triangles is a cargo ship. The different colors are tankers and fishing boats and whatever else. So this is our world, the whole Pacific. We still get tankers from Iraq and places like that. I find it absolutely bizarre. So big picture view. Then bringing it in tight, LA alone is the #1 port complex in the United States. Long Beach is #2, New York, New Jersey is #3. Put LA and Long Beach together, 9th busiest in the world, behind the big 8, all in Asia, and it's been that way the past half a dozen years. In terms of volume, 19.9 million TEUs. TEU, term of art, 20-foot equivalent unit. In a sense, that's the short trailers behind a truck. Your normal truck is pulling a 40-foot box. That's 2 TEUs. 19.9 million of those came in last year, second only to the record during COVID in 2021. But as the image shows, it's both an import and an export port. We get cargo from all around the world. We get routes from all around the world. But it's not just a container port. We have passengers, we have oil, we have autos, and everything that comes in. In terms of geography, to the left, to the west is LA. To the right, to the east is Long Beach. Navy Way is the dividing line between the two. Okay, the two main business lines: maritime information going back to 1923, and we gather and collate the schedule. We don't make the schedule, but that's the value add that we have. 13 container terminals in the port, and that's a lot what media focuses on. A lot of the trade discussion that you see in the media today is focused on that. But there are 55 total terminals in the port complex, all scheduling independent of each other. So we're the glue that every day puts together the unified schedule for all ships going and coming to all 55 terminals. In terms of the vessel traffic service, started in 1994, and that's akin to air traffic control function for the port complex. 2 people on watch, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So in terms of the database that we currently use for that assembled schedule, it's called MARIS. You can see the sample vessel information, arrivals, departure, shifts, last part of call. U.S. Customs uses our data to determine what ships to board. Its next port of call, where it's going, the agent, the berth, the number of tugs needed to push it into the dock, and there's about 30 columns of data on every ship. It's color-coded, so if you're an operator, you know what you're looking at. We know when I took the image on the 30th of July, the next 174 arrivals, 214 departures, and 40 shifts. Nothing is a surprise in the port complex anymore. In terms of the vessel traffic service, there's a dozen in the country, and basically you put one where there's a particularly confined and busy waterway. So you can see all the black stars in the United States. We're the yellow star in LA and Long Beach. We're a private company merged with the Coast Guard to operate this function. If you wonder why there's one in Louisville, Kentucky, that's when the Mississippi River is either flooding or low. In terms of what they do, the upper left-hand image is a typical busy morning. Every one of those dots with the name is a vessel. And basically, the vector ahead of it is where the vessel's going to be in 15 minutes. Thank you, computers, for figuring this out. And basically, the operator is preventing two vectors from pointing at the same place at the same time, which would be a collision. You can see our operator here on what we call the radar, but you can see that Periaster Martinez, one of our coasties, has much more than a radar. It's a wall of knowledge kind of stuff. Her partner, Mike, on this case, is on the desk, making the phone calls, taking the phone calls, making the computer entries, a two-part system, and it works extremely well. So my final slide, in terms of what we look at, Morro Bay to the Mexican border and out about 100 miles. The vessels check in with us at 25 miles, that's the outer ring, and that's when we start that vessel traffic control function, making sure the ship properly gets to the berth and doesn't hit anything. And then in tight, behind the podium here, is basically the 7-mile box outside the port complex where we do the most complex work. If you remember the backup of several years ago, we still joke that we have PTSD when we had 86 ships within this 25-mile ring during the height of the backup. And all those circles are basically anchorages where the ships don't just randomly anchor in Southern California. There are all kinds of rules, and those rules we enforce. So that's the what I need, and now I'll introduce Steve, who will tell you about the IT and how Mastermind keeps us safe and keeps it all running.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Winston. I'm the CEO of Mastermind MSP. I've been doing work for a previous MSP for about 10 years, covering clients ranging from defense contractors to construction to manufacturing. A wide range of clients. Over that time, I've seen quite a few security incidents, and today I'd like to share with you some of my experiences working with that, and then also some of my lessons learned. These are the 3 NIST guidelines related to incident response preparation. As part of that, the first item here, sorry, 1 second. The first part is establishing an operational incident handling capability. The second one is to track, document, and report incidents. And the third, test the incident response capability. Marine Exchange has, on their side, we've been doing disaster recovery and business continuity drills for years. And over that time, I can't say there's ever been a year when we didn't really learn a lesson, learn something that we missed before, some way that we can refine the process. It's been very valuable, and I encourage everybody. It's one thing to come up with a plan, but it's another one to test it during live fire, kind of like somebody that's sparring, preparing for a fight versus actually getting in there when everything goes out the window. It's always nice to come up with a plan when it's calm. That way during the storm, you've already drilled everything and you actually have a plan, and there's always going to be deviations that come from that. But at the same time, you've got a plan and you can be dynamic and deviate with it and improve your chances of success. The next topic I'm going to be talking about is risk management. The first part of that is going to be identifying high value assets. And part of that isn't just identifying like servers and databases. The second part of that is also looking at stuff like your root certificates for a certificate authority or your authentication mechanisms. Number two, assess the likelihood of and consequences of potential incidents. In that case, a lot of people will just kind of mark everything as a very high risk. And in that area, it's better to look at it based on probability and then also the damage that can be caused. Number three is prioritizing protections based on risk severity while also preparing for the unknown. The unknown comes in many different ways. The unknown could be something as simple as recently we had that sonic wall. Right now there's a lot of talk about a zero-day sonic wall exploit. The talk of the town right now is that it, oh, sorry, hold on. They don't really understand how it works, so more information started to come out, and they were saying that it came from an old CVE from 2024, where there was a 0-day on their site-to-site VPN, I'm sorry, their SSL VPN, where a threat actor captured a bunch of credentials, and they're saying that the threat actor used those credentials to re-infiltrate people afterwards. Another part of that is that when a lot of people that reported it also upgraded their firewalls during that period. When they upgraded their firewalls, standard behavior, if you were to export and import a configuration, would be that it would reset your password to password during that time. So there's also that probability that something like that could have happened as well. With that said, you look at this stuff, and even though Sonic Walls come out and said that there's no vulnerability, this has happened, the right thing to do is to err on the side of safety and make sure that you treat it as there really might be something there, and that you want to err on the side of safety. Risks are best addressed by using a combination of physical, technical, and administrative controls rather than simply checking the box with one. Doing a lot of the security framework like CMMC, it's really easy to basically go through those and meet the requirement simply checking a box. But an attacker is not going to be just checking the box. They're actually going to be testing your defenses. So it's always better to go ahead and meet these with a combination rather than just one by itself. Going back to the unknown, forgive me, all my notes are gone, so I'm free heading it now. So going back to the unknown, another thing to look at here would be the definition of an internal threat. An internal threat is often thought of as a state actor that gets hired under the pretense of infiltrating a company and extracting data. Based on my experience, that's not usually how that actually works out. That's a very high-risk move that could involve them being arrested and captured because they're there in person. A lot of times, it more so looks like for a state actor, a lot of times will use resources like LinkedIn to actually target somebody that they know is working on a sensitive project. Once they discover somebody that they think is a very good target, they're going to go ahead and enumerate things about them by using, you could establish fake communication channels and try to get their signature in order to get a private contact number. You could utilize social media such as LinkedIn or any of the other items out there. From there, once they identify this person that they're going after, they'll go ahead and make that initial contact with them. An example I'm going to give is they would contact them under the pretense of offering them a job. What a lot of times a tactic used there would be that they would offer them a job that's probably about twice their salary. So when they get this job, human nature, once you get offered and see a figure like that, it's just like gambling. They go ahead and they want to believe it's true, so they're more likely to fall victim to something like this. And a lot of times attackers can enumerate somebody to see that, maybe they have a potential for gambling, et cetera, to make the target a higher probability. So once they make contact with this person, they offer them the job, and they tell them that, an example of this would be telling them that they already pretty much have the job, their boss really wants to hire them, but they want to make sure that they're an expert in the area that they say they are, so they actually need to see some of their work. At that point, somebody wanting that dollar value to be true will often give them just enough to pacify them and make sure that they want to move on to the next stage. So at this point, this person has given somebody confidential company data. Because they've done that, they'd be much more unlikely. They're a great target because they've backed themselves in a corner. They really have no way to back out of what they've just done after giving that person that first piece of information. So at that point, the adversary is going to actually come back and basically, the adversary is going to come back and basically tell them that, they have the job, but they gave what they supplied to their boss, but they're going to need a little bit more. What they gave them was a very small scope, and they want to make sure that they're capable of actually handling this new job in its entirety. So at this point, the person has no way of backing out. They've already crossed the line that would result in termination and possible legal consequences. So this is kind of a general way that an insider threat might actually look in the real world compared to somebody just strictly getting hired and infiltrating a company. And whether or not that person actually falls for that second step of divulging a full project, it still puts them in a position where that other party could come back and blackmail them at any time. Do you have a secondary one? Oh, sweet. Awesome. Thank you. Back to number 4, the risks are best addressed by using a combination of physical, technical, and administrative controls. Controls should be complementary, meaning that a physical badge system without technical MFA is as weak as MFA without physical security. And for both of those, there would be administrative policies to enforce both. Security isn't about technology alone. It's about posture, persistence, and preparation. Adversaries layer attacks, and we should be doing the same for defense. Going back to proactive approach, here we have threat modeling and attack surface mapping. It's all about performing regular threat modeling to identify possible entry points, enumerate assets, and map out potential attacker pathways, updating models as systems do evolve, encouraging proactive identification of weaknesses and finding them before adversaries do. Continuous vulnerability management. It's all about conducting routine scanning and patch management cycles, integrating zero-day watch lists, and utilizing shared intelligence feeds. When we look at this area of continuous vulnerability management, a lot of companies will choose to either do a pen test or focus on something that's more scanning for vulnerabilities like OpenVAS, Nessus, etc. The difference between the two would be you would want to get your vulnerability management system matured to the point of making a penetration test worth it. A penetration test would be a once-in-time type scenario where if you're making a lot of serious changes after that, it's not going to accurately reflect your current security posture, and preferably you would do a combination of both. But in my opinion, with penetration testing, if you have a decent security model already, you're better off actually focusing more on vulnerability management and doing a penetration test once you're at that point due to the cost of having a high threshold. Number 4, privileged access review. This would be making sure that you're regularly auditing users and enhanced roles, service accounts, just-in-time access would be another. If somebody needs elevated access in order to perform a task, it's not just about granting them access and walking away. It's about making sure that you're monitoring what they do during that time and making sure that access is removed, whether it's through automated means or manual. Tabletop exercises and simulations. Those are equally important. It's one thing to go through and do things in theory and make a plan, but you have to actually test that plan and make sure that it works. So those are very important. Asset lifecycle management. You want to make sure that basically the weakest link in a network is always going to be the one that an attacker will target. So if you have outdated systems that are unable to be protected, if you have assets that are end of life and you're no longer able to update them. That could be firmware on a server. From there, it could be you have VMware, but you no longer have support for ESXi. Those would definitely be two other examples. Threat hunting and behavior-based detection. These days, signature-based detection is definitely not enough, and you want to make sure that you're proactively looking at behavior-based items as well. Business continuity and disaster plan based on risk analysis. End user education, as we know, end user education is definitely one of the most important elements. With that said, your most exposed endpoint is going to be anything you expose to the internet over the WAN and interfaces exposed over the firewall externally. But the second one, and the reason people are going to target those is because they can do it anonymously without ever having to make contact with anybody. But the end user is going to be a vulnerable endpoint that, even though it isn't directly exposed to the internet, there's many different services and channels that do offer a direct path to people. Incident response baselines. You can't detect anomalies if you don't know what normal looks like. Examples of these would be CPU, RAM, and network usage patterns, registry keys and file hashes, expected PowerShell, CMD, and WMIC command usage, normal outbound DNS query volumes per host. A lot of people are trying to do covert traffic. A lot of times it'll be done for DNS using TXT records where they're actually sending them in mass, siphoning off data. That's a pattern I've seen more so this year. Typical login times by user and role. If you have somebody that normally works 8 to 5 and you see them logging in after hours repeatedly, and there's other abnormalities that you can use to say that something might be going on there, it's definitely something that you could be setting up automated alerting for. Process spawn trees. If PowerPoint is spawning CMD sessions or PowerShell settings or sessions, you know there might be an issue there. Remote access tools and indicators. With those, if you have people that are executing things from the program data folder or from app data, you could be looking for file paths, file hashes. There's a lot of indicators that could be useful to indicate that there might be something there. File write activity in sensitive directories. If you have anybody that's executing out of program data, you know there's probably going to be something wrong there because that's abnormal behavior, and there's a lot of automated detections that could be used for that. Privileged access action frequency. If you see all of a sudden an account using a lot more elevations, a lot more than usual, then you know it's something you might want to look into. Endpoint to endpoint communication patterns. If you see that all of a sudden an endpoint starts initiating remote sessions, a lot that never does it normally, it's a good indicator that there might be some type of threat going on there. Logging volume and logging failures. If all of a sudden you see that there's a lot more failures in a log than normal, or also if you see that there's gaps in logs missing, that's definitely something you'd want to look at. From a red team perspective, when it comes to baselines, a lot of what those guys are looking for is using living off the land tactics. That could be using binaries or executables that are already there and signed. An attacker doesn't have to put anything on the system that's going to risk being detected. They're going to use stuff like PowerShell, WMIC, CMD, and definitely something you want to watch for. Traffic obfuscation and evasion. You could see Cobalt Strike beacons going over HTTPS, trying to mask that behavior. Excessive permissions and role abuse is definitely something people are looking for. Misconfigurations, baseline drift exploitation, shadow IT and orphaned assets, lack of egress filtering. A large majority of the clients I've ever taken on had almost no outbound filtering. It was all focused on inbound, and without filtering outbound, it's one of those areas where you're going to miss a lot that way because everything that's infiltrated your network is going to have to reach out to something else in some capacity. Abuse of inactive but enabled accounts. This could be anything from service accounts to administrator accounts that are rarely used. When it comes to that, you could have alert. Number one, you should be preventing service accounts from ever logging in. With that said, it's also something to look at as an indicator of compromise. I mentioned before, logging and alerting gaps are definitely another area, and default or weak cryptography suites. The digital attack surface starts at the edge appliance, usually a firewall, unless a network hypervisor technology is used in front of it. Patching your firewalls, the second firmware comes out, doesn't always work as planned. As we saw with Fortinet, that instability of rushed updates can cause that fine balance between availability and security. False sense of confidence with zero-day variations, bypassing rushed patches, and unknown bugs causing a wide range of usability issues, affecting critical functionality of the company. Here was CVE 2024-3400 in a nutshell. I got to give the wife credit for this one. But basically, Palo Alto is supposed to stop malicious traffic, and Barney's sitting behind Mo in that picture. Palo Alto in 2025, basically they gave you no way to change the default VPN port, and if you're exposing that on the public interface, it's definitely a danger. So I mean, you can use a combination of NAT zoning to get around that, and you could actually redirect it yourself, but it's not actually vendor supported. One thing I saw at Marine Exchange, any attacker that has SSL VPN open on a Palo Alto is exposed because it exposes that HIP report endpoint using a very simple post request and a malicious session ID cookie. This is literally just a post request right here. It writes that malicious file name shown down at the bottom right there. Got it. Okay, got it. Wrapping it up, at this point, it actually executes each of those commands. The original attack wrote a file name and it doesn't even need any file contents. It just basically needed that file name, and then it split that up and actually ran each command separately. I have to wrap it up, and I apologize. This is my first time doing this presentation. Thank you all for joining. Hopefully you gained something out of it.